What it do, man? We got what the fuck is the name of this? Oh, you should never see with a gangster's wife. Hey man, look, if you tender about her, you tender about her. But I'm not. I ain't. I leave that who that's for. I ain't. You know, I'm the grease of anything. Fuck you, man.
Michael Siri had been carrying a grudge for 12 years. 12 years of sitting with the knowledge, or at least his version of the knowledge, that while he was locked up in federal prison for drug trafficking, another man had been sleeping with his wife.
Damn.
By January 2025,
I be,
Siri
man.
was
As soon as you
43
them
years
cuffs
old,
get put,
living in a
she
subdivision
giving
in
it. She
Katy,
just giving
Texas,
it out.
running a construction business, and had 57 guns stashed at his pad, his
Damn.
office, and a storage unit he had quietly rented to move the guns off his property after his wife told him they couldn't stay in the home.
Damn.
Imagine what happens.
He had a fucking loadout.
Holding a grudge over his
He got the
cheating wife,
Battlefield,
and a stash of guns
shit,
free to be used
Call
at
of
his
Duty.
disposal. Siri had a man in mind and knew who to target. What came next would go so bad it would bring down his entire criminal enterprise, his life, his family, and his construction business in less than a month. We've covered some insane gang stories on this channel in the past, but this one is arguably not just the worst, but the most ridiculous. Katy is one of those suburbs that doesn't look like the kind of place where one of Houston's worst gang stories would come from. It sits about...
Yeah, man, we got when you sleep with a gangster's wife. Yeah, man, sometimes everybody ain't player, man. You know, some people tender, man. Hey, just how the game go, man. Get into it, though.
Michael Siri had been carrying a grudge for 12 years. 12 years of sitting with the knowledge,
12.
or at least his
12 of them
knowledge,
things.
that while he was locked up in federal prison for drug trafficking, another man had been sleeping with his wife. But January 2025,
hey man, that's gonna happen. As soon as them cuffs get put on you, trust me, bro. She going. She just giving it out. I ain't even lie.
57 guns
just
stashed
on the
at
whim in
his,
the circle.
his office, and a storage unit he had quietly rented to move the guns off his property after his wife told him they couldn't stay in the home.
This nigga has a fucking loadout.
Holding a grudge over
Battlefield and Call of Duty. Shit.
Used at his disposal. Siri
They
had a
got a
man
gun
in mind
for every
and knew who to
compartment.
target. What came next would go so bad it would bring down his entire criminal enterprise,
Houston.
his life, his family, and his construction business in less than a month. We've covered some insane gang stories on this channel in the past, but this one is arguably not just the worst, but the most ridiculous.
300 watts.
Katy is one of those suburbs that doesn't look like the kind of place where one of Houston's worst gang stories would come from. It sits about 30 miles west of downtown Houston in Harris County, mostly single-family homes and subdivisions with upscale...
I ain't gonna lie, Texas got some of the most beautiful cribs, bro.
The only
I ain't even gonna lie.
19-year-old suburban wannabes. But Siri, a financially successful drug and gun trafficker,
that's how that shit be, man.
In the Ventana Lake subdivision on Clay Road.
Bro, living like this,
children and a construction company. Back in
I don't think I'll be
when he was
trying to be
convicted of
funny
possessing
unless
more than
niggas
1,000 marijuana
you want some
plants with
Tariq
intent
from
to
Ghost
distribute, he got 24 months
type
in federal
shit,
prison
yeah.
and 5 years of supervised
man.
release.
Y'all
That
do
period
what
where he
y'all
was
do.
in jail was when he believed his wife had been unfaithful. He came out of prison carrying that
It's real
belief like
life,
a wound
dog. This
that
ain't
wouldn't
no
close.
TV show
A decade
type shit.
passed. Nothing changed for him internally. By 2024, he had made up his mind that the man he blamed was going to die. The man Siri hired to do it was Ricardo Obando Jr., a 52-year-old from Houston. Obando had his own relationship to the Siri household as the stepfather of a 24-year-old named Matthew Rosas, who would later be named as a co-defendant and charged as a getaway driver.
Damn.
The arrangement between Siri and Obando was businesslike on the surface. Siri paid Obando through his construction company, routing the payments through the business to make them look legitimate. In exchange, Obando was supposed to find the man Siri blamed for the affair, surveil him, and kill him. The plan was months in the making. Cell phone data recovered by investigators documented how Obando stalked the intended target's movements over an extended period to learn his routine and identify when he'd be the most vulnerable. Then there was a failed first attempt.
Damn.
Something went wrong, the timing was off, and the target got away without ever knowing he had been in someone's crosshairs. On January 17, 2025, Siri and Obando arranged to purchase an unregistered vehicle, a car with no paper trail connecting it to either of them. It'd definitely be a lot easier than stealing a car and bring way less heat. This job was personal for Siri, so the money didn't matter.
Damn.
Obando used the vehicle over the following weeks to continue monitoring who he believed was his target. But there was a fundamental problem with the entire operation, and nobody in the conspiracy ever caught it. The man they were watching, the man Siri had identified as the person he wanted dead, had moved years ago. He no longer lived at the address Siri associated with him. The surveillance Obando was conducting, the movements he was tracking, and the morning routine he had memorized didn't even belong to the intended target. It belonged to some random guy.
Damn.
Siri's intended target would later testify he was shocked Siri had ever even targeted him. The new guy really had zero reason to believe he was marked in any way. In the early hours of February 4th, 2025, Obando was waiting in the unregistered vehicle with Matthew Rosas. When the man came out of his home and got into his car to drive to work, they followed him. He pulled onto Highway 99, known as the Grand Parkway, one of the main commuter routes in the Houston suburbs, heavy with morning traffic. Obando pulled the vehicle alongside the man's car and opened fire with a firearm equipped with a custom-made 3D printed silencer Siri printed himself. Multiple rounds went into the victim's vehicle. He was struck in the neck, in the torso, and in the hand. The victim, critically injured, managed to stay conscious long enough to call 911 and continue speeding down the highway. A life flight helicopter was dispatched to the scene on Highway 99 at Mason Road. The victim was airlifted to a nearby hospital, and fortunately, he survived. Obando and Rosas drove away in the unregistered vehicle. Harris County Sheriff's deputies who responded to the scene initially had no reason to treat it as anything other than a road rage shooting or Grand Canyon University. No reason to treat it as anything other than a road rage shooting or a random act of violence. What eventually cracked the case open was the FBI getting involved with the cell phone records. Investigators pulled the data off the phones belonging to both Siri and Obando and found a pattern that no road rage incident could explain, showing weeks of coordinated surveillance of a specific address, communication between the two men about movements and timing, and payments flowing from Siri's construction business to Obando. On March 6, 2025, roughly a month shooting,
more technical errors, man. My bad.
Warrants on multiple properties connected to Siri. At 6 in the morning, they surrounded his home on Castillo Lakes Drive in Ventana Lake.
That's how they get motherfuckers, man. You sleep.
Out of the house and
went inside.
There they found 18 guns.
Pull up early, bright and early, right before you even up, man. Before you even get a chance to yawn and scratch your ass, bro.
At a storage unit Siri had quietly rented on February 28th, they found 34 more firearms, 53 guns total, owned by a man who legally could not own them. Siri was arrested and taken into federal custody. The scale of what was found at Siri's properties told its own story about what kind of operation he had been running out of his Katy subdivision. 53 firearms is not a collection. 53 firearms hidden across a family home, a business office, and a freshly rented storage unit by a known gangster is a distribution-level arsenal. Federal agents identified firearms with multiple makes, models, and calibers. Among them were suppressors, the same technology Siri had apparently been manufacturing himself using the 3D printer investigators found at his office. Investigators later presented evidence at trial that Siri had arranged for someone to move a batch of between 20 and 30 of the guns to his family home in mid-February 2025, roughly 2 weeks after the Highway 99 shooting.
You don't have the
guns
still?
The evidence. His wife told FBI agents that when she discovered the guns in the house, she confronted him and said they could not stay there with the children. That was the moment Siri rented the storage unit on February 28th and moved them there. 4 days later, on March 6th, the FBI was at his front door. Siri's wife was interviewed by the FBI the day of the raid. She would later testify at trial, as would the actual intended target, the man Siri had specifically set out to kill. That man confirmed the affair had in fact occurred and described his own shock at learning that someone had put a contract on his life over something that had happened more than a decade ago. The jury also
that little shit must be fire as fuck. I ain't gonna lie, then you still with her.
And they watched the 911 call that his
going on?
In-car camera had recorded. There was also dash cam footage of the shooting itself.
You got to take that over her.
Pulled up alongside the man on the highway.
People don't be trying to hear that shit.
Drifting across lanes as he tried.
We got to see the wife.
It simply could not have been worse for Siri. And the comical irony of the entire thing was that the affair had in fact happened. But the man he wasted months, money, and his future as a legal businessman tracking wasn't even the right guy. The federal indictment, returned by a grand jury on July 15, 2025, charged Siri, Obando, and Matthew Rosas on multiple counts. Rosas, Obando's stepson, was charged as the driver of the vehicle during the shooting. The trial ran for 8 days in federal court before the Southern District of Texas. After roughly 2 days of deliberations, the jury convicted Siri and